Good evening and welcome to After Hours. Joining us this evening is Duane Geddes, and he is the Executive Director of the Sam Sullivan Disability Foundation. And welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for asking me.
So let's start with the past and the history. The foundation has been around for 30 years, and just moments ago I found out it started with a society 20 years ago. So can you talk about that?
Well, I think the other way around, really.
Okay, sorry.
The foundation has been around for about 20 years, but
okay, sorry.
We're really an amalgamation or a conglomerate of 6 different societies that run programs aimed at people with physical disabilities, significant physical disabilities. And above that is the foundation, which was established about 20 years ago, essentially as a funds development entity. So it will raise funds that can be used to support the operating societies, or the societies that run programs. And those societies really started with the Tetra Society of North America, or what became Tetra. As you know, Sam, a former mayor of Vancouver, is a quadriplegic, C4-5 incomplete, so he broke his neck skiing when he was 19. And like many people that suffer spinal cord injuries, he went into a period of quite significant depression as he was going through rehab and whatnot. And it took him about 7 years to recover. So that was around 1985, 86, when he began to accept the idea that he was now a quadriplegic. And he wanted to begin to gain a little bit of independence. And he had moved into an apartment out of his parents' home, but he soon discovered that he couldn't do anything. He couldn't open doors, cupboards, use his bathroom. Many obstacles in his environment. He wanted to find a way to overcome those, and really out of desperation, he made a phone call one day to APEG BC, which is the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists. And a couple days later, he got a knock on his door, and it was an engineer by the name of Paul Chermak. Paul had worked on many hydroelectric projects around the world, and he said, "What can I do for you?"
Interesting.
And that was
Sam took that step. That was pretty brave in itself,
it was. It was. And Paul showed up, and they began creating ways that devising ways that Sam could move about his apartment, open his blinds, open the fridge with a bent coat hanger, these types of things. And pretty soon, Sam was operating much more independently within his own little apartment. But Sam began to think that, and of course, while he was doing this, he began to try to raise funds, because he thought funds was the way that he could
get people access.
That's right, and was the secret.
Can we just stop? Like, I'm trying to get a picture, because I think times have changed somewhat for people with disabilities. So what was it like then? Give us a picture. Well, you're telling us about the apartment, but was there sort of that public
I don't know that the
connection?
public was as aware in those days. I don't think that there were the resources that there are today for people with disabilities. There were certainly organizations that were starting new programs and trying to develop things. But it was about that time when people like Terry Fox and Rick Hansen and Doug Mowat, who had been the first elected member of the Parliament in BC, legislature in BC, had been cutting new ground for people with disabilities. So it was a very interesting time in BC and really the world, and why we became kind of a leader in the world in this area. But Sam, because of Paul's appearance, really realized that it's not funding, it's people that can make the difference. And he thought, well, if I can get Paul to do this for me, what about other people with disabilities? That was the genesis of what we now call the TETRA Society of North America. TETRA recruits volunteer engineers and technicians and designers and handy people. And we recruit these people in chapters across the country, and this is what they do. They create assistive devices for people with disabilities. We now operate about 40 chapters across the country and several in the U.S. And every year we're creating around 400, 500 assistive devices for people. And it can range from an adaptive crib for a new mom with quadriplegia to cup holders on wheelchairs. It's really quite simple things usually. That was the beginning, and about that time, of course, Rick Hansen was making his journey around the world, his Man in Motion tour, and in 1986 at Expo, Margaret Thatcher presented Rick's family on Great Britain Day with an adaptive sailboat called a Sunbird, Bellway Sunbird, 18-foot sailboat. Rick was in Newfoundland at that time preparing to make his final trek across the country. When he got back in 1987, in the springtime, he was pretty busy and the sailboat sat unused. Sam approached Rick and said, I know you have the sailboat, can we purchase it from you? Because we have some people that want to try sailing. And Rick said, well, I can't sell it to you. It was a gift. But if you form an organization, I'll donate it to you. And that was the beginning of the Disabled Sailing Association of BC, which was the first disabled sailing organization in North America, and really the genesis of the sport here. Sam took that boat. He and his friends got some volunteers together. They knocked on every door of every yacht club in town thinking that was the place to go, and no success. But they did hit on a lucky spot when they walked into the offices at the Jericho Sailing Center.
Okay,
Mike Cotter, who's still the general manager there, welcomed them in. Thought it was a crazy idea, but welcomed them in, and they did around 20 sails or so that first year. But 1991, Sam started a regatta called Mobility Cup. And he invited other people with quadriplegia from across the country. He said, you're going sailing.
Well, this was going to be my next question. How did he bring in other people?
These people had never tried sailing, no boats, and never, but these people showed up. And many of them went away excited. Sam was able to generate funding.
Must have been scary, though, too.
Of course it was.
Yes.
Of course it was. But the Bellway, the Sunbird was an adaptive boat. It was very, very safe and meant for people with disabilities. But still, it was scary. A lot of people that came went home with boats. Sam was able to raise funds for boats. They were very enthused and excited about sailing. And disabled sailing branches began popping up in places like Kelowna and Calgary and Toronto, Montreal. And today there are numerous branches across the country, and literally thousands of people are sailing.
So how did he get the message out? Because times have changed now. We have all the computer.
It was really by inviting people to Vancouver and he just saying, you're going sailing, you're going to compete. And people had never tried sailing, got into boat with volunteers with them. And they did. They went home, they got enthused, they got other people with disabilities involved, they got funders involved, volunteers involved, and these organizations sprang up. And because sailing holds a special attraction for people because it is about the only sport/recreation where people can get out of their wheelchairs and be independent. And sail by themselves, move by themselves. They don't people with disabilities don't need to have a volunteer with them. Many do, and many do want that, but there are many people with high levels of disability. So a person with high levels of quadriplegia, for instance, completely paralyzed from the neck down, who are sailing solo, independent.
Wow, that is amazing.
And Sam and a boat designer here in Vancouver by the name of Don Martin, who, if you're a sailboat or know a sailboat at all, you'd recognize that name. Well, Don Martin has designed the 242 and the 244 as a very he's a sailboat designer known around the world. But he and Sam went to work on the design of a new boat in the mid-90s, which became the Martin 16. Specifically for people with disabilities. It's unsinkable, untippable, and yet very fast and maneuverable. Yeah, and most importantly, it can really accommodate sip and puff sailing, whereas the old Sunbird really had difficulty handling a sip and puff system.
Can you talk about this sip and puff?
Sip and puff? Well, you may have seen people operate wheelchairs with sip and puff. It's just simply a means of using air pressure, either sipping or blowing into straws that create pressure within a gauge, a gizmo, that's right, that can be directed, that pressure can be converted into electrical energy, which can control rudder direction or whether your sheets are in or out.
So are there any limits? We're going to talk more about other societies that you have and programs, but are there limits to the type of disabilities people can have? Or?
No, we focus on people with physical disabilities. And of course, normally we're talking about quadriplegia and paraplegia, spinal cord injuries, but many people come to us, folks with muscular sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, post-polio, heart and stroke victims, brain injury. So the full scope of physical disabilities, either acquired or conditions that people were born with, cerebral palsy, of course.
So it must have been an exciting time. Like once the sailing started happening and there was this independence, there must have been, well, was there? Who started having input and what ideas came and what sort of?
Well, lots of ideas came, and really, Sam will tell you that that he was devising really societies or activities, means for people like himself to do things, but it was based on what Sam liked to do.
Right.
Sam was
has to start something.
He loved hiking, for instance, and he longed to find a way to get into the wilderness. And he would tell you, he used to drive his van up against a tree and just roll the window down and bring the tree in so he could smell the pine needles, or the fir branches. And
things we just take for granted so much.
One day he was talking with Paul, this original Tetra volunteer, and he was saying, I would need to find a means. And of course they had tried electrical vehicles like golf carts and whatnot. But he says, this is not what we want. We need something that can really access the wilderness. And Paul, quite literally, sketched something out on a napkin in a cafe that became our trail rider. What we call a trail rider, it's a single wheel vehicle that is operated back and front by people we call Sherpas. But it's a single wheel, human-powered vehicle that can really take people with disabilities anywhere. And we've been to places like the Everest Base Camp. In fact, above the Everest Base Camp, we've been to the top of Kilimanjaro many times. But more importantly, we do hundreds of trips through Stanley Park, Lynn Canyon.
I used to go to Lynn Canyon. That's tough walking.
That's right. That's right. But the Fen in South Surrey, or the Seymour Demonstration Forest in North Vancouver, and we
talk about opening up. Like when I saw that you had a hiking program. I mean, just the thought, you know, like talk about opening a whole other world for people.
That organization is called the BC Mobility Opportunities Society, which is quite a mouthful, but it's BC MOS, as we call it, and it's really finding people with disabilities or finding ways for them to experience the wilderness. And our trail rider and our hiking program is one means. The forerunner to BC MOS was actually Sam wanted to try ultralight flying. And he formed the Disabled Ultralighters of Vancouver, which
is one step up from sailing.
That's right. Disabled Ultralighters Society, which was DOVES, morphed into the BC Mobility Opportunities Society. And today, in fact, right now, we've had a kayaking program for some time, but we're amalgamating our kayaking program with a paddleboarding program for people with disabilities. We now have the ability to put people in chairs on boards, and
wow,
out they go.
I've seen those paddle boarders, and even just able-bodied. Well, I wouldn't do it. Kayaking was a big step because I thought once I was in, if it turned over, I would be stuck.
Our kayaks and our kayaks and our paddle boards have pontoons, so they're very, very stable, and they're specially built to accommodate people with disabilities. But it's another form of recreation, and working with the city and the Parks Board, we're going to be using new docks that were constructed at the east end of Falls Creek. Right at the new Creekside Community Center, right behind Science World, and we're going to be right in there with the dragon boaters and start in May.
So the people who use the programs and are a part of this, are there money issues? Can it be anybody?
No, there's always money issues.
No, but you know what I mean. Like, can anybody be partake in this?
Everybody can partake. The only criteria is you need to have a physical disability. We target what we like to direct our program specifically at people with what we call significant physical disabilities, people with higher levels of mobility concerns. But we do have many people who are ambulatory who also participate. For instance, we had a young man, actually from Calgary, but we supported him as he became the first person with no arms to climb Mount Everest 2 years ago. And so it's still a significant physical disability not to have arms. So, but that's our target market, and everybody with a disability. And there are lots of people out there with multiple disabilities, with developmental disabilities, cognitive disabilities, but who also have physical disabilities. And of course, those folks are absolutely welcome to and do take part in our programs.
Now, it must be a lot to organize and keep organized. So talk a bit about staff, volunteers.
Okay. Well, I should just quickly mention some of our other programs too. We have a fairly large society called Connectra, which is all about creating work opportunities in preparation for work for people with disabilities.
That's an important one.
Right. We have the Vancouver Adapted Music Society. Sam was
That's how I discovered all this. I saw a documentary on it.
That's right. Yeah. And Sam was a pianist before he injured himself, and he actually formed a band called Spinal Cord, CHORD, along with another fellow with a disability, Dave Symington. They formed this band. In fact, it was Rick Hansen's wheelchair repair guy on his Man in Motion tour, Don Alder, who was part of that band. Is one of the world's greatest guitar players. And that was the forerunner of VAMS, and we now operate a fully equipped recording studio at GF Strong Rehab Center, which we're in the process of expanding right now. And our other organization is called the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association.
Yes, I was going to mention
DIGA.
Yeah.
And we operate a number of community gardens with facilities for people with disabilities. So that's our organization. In terms of our staff and how we do this, well, we're pretty lean. We have only 10 full-time staff to operate all of these things, but we rely on a number of contractors. Approximately, just in the local area, we have a number of people operating on contracts who work part-time to run our studios, or in the summertime, summer students to run our sailing and paddleboarding programs and hiking programs and whatnot. And we have many, literally hundreds of people under, well, volunteers who are doing everything. With Tetra, of course, and all of our societies rely heavily on these volunteers to help us put our, we couldn't do it without our volunteers.
Funding. So the foundation was partly formed to help with funding. So how does that work? Where does your funding come from?
Well, we received some support from the provincial government through the gaming grants, but otherwise our support comes from other foundations, private foundations, community foundations across the country and in the U.S. who support programs specifically for people with disabilities. So we're constantly writing funding proposals to support programs or expansion and whatnot.
And that's a skill in itself.
It is. But quite over the last 10 years, we've made a concerted effort to develop a social enterprise arm. So in addition to our societies, we also run 3 little businesses that are either generating revenues for us. The profits from those businesses come back into our societies to support what we do. For instance, we have Martin 16 Sailing, Inc., which builds and markets Martin 16 sailboats. We have a company called Kawak Access Equipment, Inc., which builds trail riders, and we've now sold.
It's all very clever, actually.
Well, we
Yeah,
sell and market trail riders, and we put almost close to 200 around the world. And in fact, Australia has just taken it to heart, and their park system has been fabulous in purchasing trail riders and starting programs. And we've more recently started a little company called Tetra Gear, Inc., and we are in the process right now of getting very close to the launch of a wheelchair light system, a lighting system which people can operate independently, but it's all about keeping people safe in and around traffic in their wheelchairs.
Oh, okay. That sounds interesting.
And we think that we think our research is telling us, our marketing research, that there could be quite a market for something like this, because up until now it's been really the orange flags that you've seen and little else. Yeah, people are, have tried going to places and buying reflective lights and reflective vests and flashing lights, but our system will give a person a 360 ability to be seen at night.
So that's
we're excited by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a big launch coming up next month.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved?
Oh, that's a good question. I had been in the newspaper business for many years, but I'd gone through a transition there, and I'd got wind that Sam's organization was looking for a funds development manager, and I knew that I could write, or I thought I could write, and so I applied. For some reason they hired me, and I was the funds development manager for the first 5 years. That was in 2000, but something happened in 2000. Sam went and got elected as mayor.
Took him away from
Vancouver, and the day after he got elected, he came up to me and he said, "Here, Duane, you run it. I got
other things to do."
That's right. And that was as he was driving off with his new driver, headed for City Hall. And so I had to go around, and Sam, I got the support of each of the boards, because all of our societies
have different
have
boards.
different boards,
Oh,
and I
okay.
had to convince them that I should be the executive director of each of these boards, and for some reason they went along with that, and have kept,
Were you
kept me.
nervous? Were you nervous taking on something so strong, powerful? And...
Well, I always knew that Sam was a phone call away. So,
right.
And he knows what the societies are aimed at. And if I ever have a question, or if I ever think we might be deviating, or if he gets wind that we might be deviating, the phone calls
start happening.
That's right. Either I call him or he calls me, and it's been a very good situation. Sam remains an honorary member of the foundation board, but without voting privileges. We're not going to give him a vote. But because he's an MLA and represents Vancouver Falls Creek, we just don't
want any conflict.
That's correct. That's correct. Because we do receive funding from the province, and there could be that funding perception there. So we try to keep him out of trouble as much as possible, and ourselves.
Out of trouble as well.
Yeah.
So I worked up at UBC as part of the Disability Resource Center for Print Impaired People. I worked in their recording center. And one of the things I noticed was that blind people were isolated, very isolated. People seemed, the public, even on a bus or whatever, almost seemed afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Is isolation as much of an issue for people with disabilities as it has been in the past?
I think so. I think so. I think it is. I think many people in the general population feel as you do, or did, that people are not necessarily comfortable or don't know how to approach a person with a disability, or how to say, how to act, how to behave. You learn pretty soon that they're people. They're like everybody else, and they have, people with disabilities have the same wants and desires and wishes, and can tell stories and have great stories and have wonderful contributions to make, just like the rest of us. But a lot of people can't see the individual; they only see the wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And but you eventually, if you let yourself go and talk to the person, you pretty soon find out that it's a person, and but that's not unusual. And I think people with disabilities will feel that. Maybe that's normal, but hopefully normal is changing. And I think it has. I think even in the 15, 16 years I've been part of this, I think I know my feelings have changed, but
well, I changed.
Yeah,
too.
and I think society is changing as well.
So we're quickly running out of time. Can people help? Can they give your offices a call, and how do they do that?
We always need volunteers. If people are interested in gardening or hiking or sailing, or if you happen to be somebody with some technical skills and would like to tinker with things, we need volunteers with Tetra. And of course, we always need money too.
Yes, that's.
Yes, people can reach us by online we're the disabilityfoundation.org, or our phone number is 604-688-6464, and somebody will answer, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much for doing this.
No, you're very
and we're
welcome.
going to be doing more in the future, so people have to keep their eyes open to catch some of the actual programs and people involved.
I hope we can. I really appreciate your asking us along, and
we're going to.
Oh, good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.